Welcome to Instruction Discussion, our weekly look at the latest topics and trends in education affecting schools here on Long Island and schools around the world. Whether you're a teacher, parent, or student, listen for tips and strategies to help you navigate the educational landscape. There's a bell. It's time to start today's Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boston Hill, and welcome to Instruction Discussion, where each week we will examine a recent trend or development in education and its impact on Long Island. Today's guest is a Long Island native who has spent the last 20 years working with students, teachers, and scholars throughout New York State to explore technologies that impact learning, curate professional development, and influence the future of education locally and globally. She currently works in the School of Education at St. John's University as the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Faculty Development, and is an Associate Professor of Educational Technology for the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. Let's welcome Dr. Aliya Holmes to Instruction Discussion on 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. It's great to be able to connect with you on this level. I know we're familiar with each other for a number of years, but to speak with each other and converse on a more professional level like this is refreshing. So I'm
Thank you, and I thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. But before we actually delve into today's class, let's find out a little bit more about you. So, what got you into the realm of education, and what got you to the level where you are now?
Oh, that's a great question. I come from a family of educators. I am happy to say that I'm a third generation educator. My grandfather was a principal in Delaware. My mother has been a 30-year plus educator here in New York, and one of the first African-American principals in the Brentwood School District. And they encouraged me to pursue education. However, I had a father who allowed me to tinker and allowed me to play with the gadgets and devices. And so being a daddy's girl, I had a love for technology very early on. And I was also in a school district that had a computer science program that started in kindergarten.
Wow.
And I learned to code as early as kindergarten and first grade in the Brentwood School District, and continued through high school. I think I was the only girl in the classroom by the time we were graduating. But I then pursued that in college as well, and studied computer science and mathematics, and then morphed that into a love for educational technology, and have found my home ever since. That led me to a career at RPI and at St. John's, where I've been at St. John's for 16 going on 17 years now, and proudly have now become the Associate Dean there. But we've done some great work throughout New York, and hope to continue that moving forward.
Nice. Shout out to the Brentwood School District. I'm sure that they'll be very happy to hear that their native daughter is doing very well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, kids can learn, you can start their career planning very early, and I applaud them for doing that.
Excellent. So let's get into today's discussion somewhat. We know that history is going to look back upon this whole time, the whole pandemic of 2020, from a variety of angles. From your purview, from the roles that you've had and the role that you currently have, what do you think is going to be the impact from an educational standpoint?
Oh, that's a great question. I think right now we're at a position or at a point where we're either going to do this right or we're really going to do this wrong. And the right way would be a way that all students benefit from this experience and are able to thrive moving forward. Access right now is our biggest problem. So access to resources, access to technology, access to teachers, access to the skills and resources that even teachers need. The second one would then be support, where if we are moving to remote learning, then the parents need support, teachers need support in the physical classroom and also in the digital classroom. Without those, we're going to see a larger gap and divide, and the impact is going to be even more significant because some people are going to be impacted in really beneficial ways and some people are going to be impacted in very negative ways. So I think access is very important, and support would be the next thing.
And so how do you think that we can improve on the access? So when you say access, what are you kind of referring to? Are you just referring to the access to the resources themselves? Are you referring to the home access as far as the technology aspect of it, as far as the Wi-Fi access and things like that, or a combination of the two?
So it's a combination of the two. Like access, part of it is infrastructure and the tools that are there. But then also access to a system and access to information. So I believe that eventually there are going to be two different classes or groups of people, and one is going to be those who have access to information and those who don't. And that is going to be this digital divide is going to really separate people from information, and access to information is going to be very important. So I'm going to use a New York City example, but in New York City, and I see it sometimes in bus systems here, they're using QR codes to access websites, and then you'll find the schedule to the bus or to the subway using a QR code. But if you don't know what that code is, and if you don't have a device, you can't get access to that information. So it's the device, but it's also the information that you will find when you actually get to that page. And that goes back to literacy skills. Being able to read. Reading is significant. Understanding and having a great relationship with mathematical reasoning. All of these things, these foundational skills are paramount. And I think that having access even to basic skills is going to be a struggle. And we're seeing that challenge exist at all levels at this point.
No, because I know that one of the things that this pandemic has, I guess, magnified has been that that separation or that digital divide, so to speak, that we do have. Because you notice that there are some families that have great Wi-Fi service, and then you have some that don't. And then you have those families all the way in between, at every level in between. So how do we support those families that may not necessarily have the access to the Wi-Fi networks or the strong Wi-Fi that is going to be necessary to get work completed?
That's a fantastic question. And it's something that I've been asked several times. I really don't have a firm answer, but I can give you examples of what has been done. So in some cities, some districts, they have had Wi-Fi buses or hubs come into neighborhoods. And students in that area have a certain time where they can access internet for free. We know that companies like Spectrum, Optimum Online, Optimum TV, they've actually offered free Wi-Fi for 3 months. That kind of gives people in Long Island an opportunity to have access during this phase. But then after some point, they would have to pay. We have companies like that we can't sit in right now, but if we could visit places like McDonald's and Panera and Starbucks that would normally offer free Wi-Fi if you were there. So the Wi-Fi issue is going to be a challenge because it is also a commercial business. And, unless the government or our county decides to do something extremely wonderful, like offer free Wi-Fi for county residents, then it's going to be a consistent problem, and it's going to deny access, is going to be the deciding factor on who has access to information. And at this point, a strong education moving forward.
Yeah, I know that it has been a discussion that has been taking place for a while now, as far as municipalities offering free internet service along with everything else that they're going to be providing, almost like a utility. So, I mean, that might be the way to go as well. And we'll see what kind of traction it does develop going forward. So I know that also before this whole pandemic did hit, that there were some technologies being developed, and you have more of a closer insight into these things than most people do from an educational standpoint. So pre, I guess, COVID-19, what were some of those technologies that were on the cusp, on the horizon, that were going to start to impact education? Or better yet, what direction technologically was education heading in?
Well, I mean, there are lots of things that have been developed that we are starting to see immersed into the classrooms. And one of those things could be virtual reality or augmented reality, where students, if you've ever seen Ready Player One, have the headsets over their eyes, and it's a digital world, but they are immersing themselves in that world. And augmented reality allows you to have a layer over top of what you can actually see, reality, and have digital inputs. So you can use something like a pair of glasses that has a screen, and you can see information on what building you're looking at, or what statue you're looking at, or where you are on a map. And so things like that are being used in terms of medical science, architecture, and in general content classes like history, and like looking at what civilization might have looked like 1,000 years ago. So those types of things are going to be pretty helpful, but again, very expensive. And so if classrooms are no longer, if we don't have a traditional classroom and parents are now required to have these tools in their homes, you know, it definitely could cost tens of thousands of dollars to have everything for each child when we talk about one-to-one basis. So I think there's some amazing things, robotics as well, and using robots to interact and to build and to design with engineering principles. But again, very expensive if each family has to finance this experience.
Right. You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is Dr. Aliya Holmes, Associate Dean of Graduate Studies and Associate Professor in the School of Education at St. John's University. Let's get into that for a minute. What do you do in your role as the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies?
Oh, excellent question. So we have some really great programs at St. John's University. I support graduate programs, so that's really for students who have already completed their bachelor's, who are going on to explore the world of education, either as teachers and getting an additional certificate, and also initial teachers we do at the grad level. We look at counseling, we have literacy programs, TESOL programs, and then we also have a whole graduate program that looks at educational leadership and administration as well. So I get to really help to build educational leaders, help to encourage and mold educational leaders and have those programs that do that. And then we also get to do extensive research on what's currently happening and what we can do to change that to improve the system.
So how are our future teachers and school leaders being prepared for situations like what we're seeing now? I know there has been, as a former principal myself, there has been no training, no education that would have prepared anybody for what we have just gone through. But what is being done, or what has been done to kind of put our leaders on that track to be able to handle these types of situations?
I agree with you completely. What we've experienced in 2020 has not been this can't be found in a textbook. This is definitely trial by fire. But I think we are doing the best that we can with the resources that we have. There's been a lot of misinformation along the way, but I think educators across the board are really doing their best under pressure. And I really congratulate everyone for getting this far already. So moving forward, I think preparing teachers it's going to change. It has to change at this point. Everything needs to change at this point. So I think one thing is that we can't look at a traditional classroom as being the only model moving forward. There's going to have to be a digital aspect, a remote aspect, and a classroom that is now flexible at the K-12 level and also at the higher ed level moving forward. We have to be flexible. Learning is going to be fluid moving forward. That's going to be a challenge for a lot of teachers. And that's going to be a challenge for a lot of principals and higher ed administrators and faculty as well. Many people are very comfortable in the teacher up front, students sitting in rows, and you listen, I tell you what we do. But we're definitely seeing that shift, and that is actually a good thing. Our students are very different at this point. They're very quick learners. They've had access to lots of resources and technology. They've had a lot of exposure to information, and we need to develop a system that supports them moving forward. So training is I can't just call it training. The education and preparation of teachers is shifting.
That's good to hear, because I know I've often said it to the teachers that I led in for a while now, that the students that are in front of us are the digital natives, and we are the digital immigrants. And so it was like they're learning at this digital speed and we have learned at an analog speed. So you have that conflict that's taking place. And I think until we are able to get our curriculum up to digital speed from that analog basis, we're going to continue to see that digital divide. We're going to continue to see the difficulties that our students are going to have with understanding the way that we teach, because we teach the way that we were taught. And
I agree. And that's a great reference to Mark Prensky with the digital natives and digital immigrants. I think now we can even say that we have other layers to that. And I think that we really need to challenge ourselves. And I think it starts with the curriculum as well. So the curriculum is outdated, inaccurate, and I think it's trying to keep us stagnant. And so changing the textbooks, telling the truth in our textbooks and our curriculum would be very helpful, being more inclusive and culturally relevant, being sensitive to all kinds of things, and really embracing a global mindset in terms of what we teach would really help our students.
No, I think you're absolutely right because right now, the way that I see education, that one of the biggest problems with education is we are preparing students for jobs that no longer exist, or that are disappearing daily, as opposed to preparing them for jobs that don't yet exist.
I agree.
And I think that's where our curriculum needs to have that shift. And until that happens, we're going to always lag behind. Education should be at the forefront of everything,
right,
opposed to lagging behind everything. And I think that's where the first change has to take place.
Yeah, I agree. And so I would say that 21st century skills like problem solving, reasoning, being able to be critical thinkers, being able to work collaboratively, being able to communicate, all of those things are skills that our students are losing, and they're also not reinforced in the current education. So they're taught to get answers, but they don't know how to work under pressure, or when things don't go right, they kind of break down. We need to help our students develop skills so that they can work under pressure. We're seeing a lot of mental health issues during the pandemic at young ages and at older ages because they have a difficulty with crisis and problem solving. And so we need to be sensitive to that and prepare them.
You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is Dr. Aliya Holmes, Associate Dean of Graduate Studies and Associate Professor in the School of Education at St. John's University. Let's get into this a little bit. What do you think families and educators, therefore, can do, since we brought up anxiety? What do you think that families and educators can do to kind of reduce the anxiety that some students may feel in a distance learning environment and support the learning process?
Fantastic question. So I think it is important to understand that the students are feeling anxiety and the parents are as well. And the first thing that I've told many parents and children is to be patient, to really understand that everyone was thrown into the situation. I think we have to learn to be more sensitive and compassionate to each other and what we're feeling, and to be able to communicate that, because a lot of parents may not understand the curriculum, may not understand, for instance, the new math of how something's being taught. I didn't learn it that way. And there's a lot of anxiety that's coming out as anger. And so there's a lot of yelling and a lot of crying. And so sometimes if it's that emotional, you can step back. You can step back from this process and find something that works for you. And do things in small chunks. Pace yourself. The work is not going anywhere, literally. So you can pace yourself. I think it's more important to keep the family structure healthy and whole and to learn to work as a team, but it does require work. The second thing that I would say would be to have a schedule. So to understand when it's academic time, when it's TV time, when it's time to eat, when it's time to clean, especially if parents are working at home, then a schedule working as a family, as a team is going to be important. And without that schedule, it's going to be extremely chaotic. So I've also known and talked to parents about developing a system where if the cup is up, you can come and ask me questions if I'm on a Zoom, but if I turn the cup upside down, write it on a note, and I will write my answer to you. But, please don't just blurt out and, unless there's like blood or a fire or, somebody's not breathing, these are the things, this is how we're going to work together as a team. So you can help me with my job and I can help you with your job. So I think scheduling and then planning, working as a team are great ideas. The last thing I'm going to say is that we could teach each other. So children may know the technology better than their parents. There may be something that parents know so that they can have a moment where they share tips with each other. No, this is how you do this. Let me show you how to do this. And, let me show you how to, do FaceTime on your iPhone or on your, Windows device. So these are things that parents and children can do together to have fun. And then play, go outside, do whatever you can to have family time away from the computer.
No, I think that's extremely important as far as the play time. I actually had an interview. The young lady spoke about the wellness aspect. So taking that time after you do all of the academic pieces, you need to kind of push away from the computer for a little while and get up and move around, and so that you experience some other things as well.
Yeah, you have to develop the whole person. And I think a lot of times I'm very nervous about us having these sedentary lives where we're just sitting in a chair in front of a screen all day. We have to move, but we may not be feeding our artistic selves or our spiritual selves. So getting outside and really taking a walk and having a conversation off of a device is very important. And I really encourage people to do that.
At the very beginning, I did allude to the fact that we have a personal relationship. We go back a few years. So I know that you do a lot of work, a lot of great work in the community with community service, especially through your membership in Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, as well as some other organizations, especially since you have served as the past president of the Suffolk County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. So what role has Delta Sigma Theta played in the supporting of educational initiatives?
Thank you. Yes, as immediate past president of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Suffolk County Alumni Chapter, we've had a long history in the organization of supporting education. From our early bookmobiles when the organization was first founded, to what we do locally in our chapter, like our Delta Gems program, where we work with young children, young girls actually, and our Embodied program, where we work with young men, providing them with academic skills, socialization skills, and just information and resources that you aren't going to get in a traditional classroom with this current curriculum. We expose them to things like HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and the differences between those types of colleges. Most public schools and private schools will never mention them, but there's a lot of history, there's a lot of power that comes out of those schools, and a lot of our leaders have graduated from HBCUs. And so we talk about Black history. We provide them with examples of leaders beyond Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, to tell the stories that are usually unheard or hidden. And we don't want them to be forgotten. We want them to know that they're part of a rich legacy. And if they know their history, then they can definitely carry that with them. Mm-hmm. So that's very important. We've done other programs with the Boys and Girls Club of Bellport to help support those children there with computer skills and college enrichment courses where we're trying to inspire young children to go to college and that they can start planning for that as early as middle school. So we've done workshops with them there. And we just continue to do a lot because you should learn something new every day. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten that, and we're trying to push that message forward.
Excellent, excellent. I know I've actually had the pleasure of working with the Embody program in a couple of other boroughs in the city. And it's the young men who I was able to work with through that program were extremely thankful because of the information I was able to give them. And I know they came back and spoke to some of the sorors who were running the program and said, and still glow about the workshops that were conducted for that. So definitely kudos to all of you, to you and the rest of your sorors for putting those types of programs together.
Thank you.
I know we could definitely go on and talk for a long time about the educational issues that we're facing today. But if you had one thing to leave our audience with, one final thought about how we can potentially close the educational achievement gap, what would that be?
Oof, that's a tough question, Kevin. I think we have to help each other. This is not anything that we can do alone. I think it's not enough to help yourself. You have to help someone else along the way. And so I think that working together, working as a community is going to be important. As you said, what one house has, the next house next door may not have. So I think it's important to ask questions, to say, what is it that you need? What is it that I can help with? And I think moving forward, because we do not know what education is going to look like in September, we might have to go back to some old school ways where families are working together for childcare so that parents can go back to work. So we're going to have to figure out how we can do this, but it's going to require us to work together. And that includes the teachers, that includes principals. We have to build a community and work as a community.
So it really means that we're going to have to practice it takes a village to raise a child mentality in order to get through this. We'd like to thank our guest today, Dr. Aliya Holmes, the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies, new Associate Dean of Graduate Studies and Associate Professor in the School of Education at St. John's University, for coming on our show today.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you again. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and thank you all for listening to Instruction Discussion, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.